podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Two-Footed Podcast here on EPL Index. Now, before we kick things off today, I just want to share something with everybody. This episode is brought to you by our partners at Sky Bet, and we've teamed up with Sky Bet because they truly understand what it means to be a fan. Sky Bet appreciates the length that people go through to support their team in all areas, whether you're a match-going fan or otherwise, and there's just no better fit for us right now than a partnership with the good folks at Sky Bet. So with that said, let's go. What's good, boys and girls? Two-Footed Podcast. Today is Tuesday. It is the 7th of May. Hope you're all well. Hope you all had an enjoyable bank holiday weekend. We had Premier League action all weekend, and I'm sure you're aware of what took place. Luton won, Everton won on the Friday night. Everton go 1-up through a Calvert-Lewin penalty. Adebayo equalises 7 minutes later. And the game played out as sort of expected. Dull, lacking in quality. Teams trying to go for it, but not really possessing the tools to do so. On Saturday, Arsenal 3, Bournemouth 0. Arsenal huffed and puffed a lot in that first half. They get a penalty on 42 minutes or whatever it was. It's a blatant dive by Kai Havertz that fools the referee, and VAR showing once again that it's not fit for purpose. Saka steps up and scores. Trossard scores on 70. And then Declan Rice scores in the 97th minute when the game is already over to make it look a little bit more comfortable than it actually was. Like Arsenal, if they don't get that first goal, are potentially in bother. And when it was 2-0, Bournemouth had a perfectly fine goal disallowed because David Raya threw himself on the floor. It's week after week they're getting these big decisions go their way. Against Spurs, 2, maybe 3 massive decisions that went their way. And again here, 2 went their way. But look, they keep winning. It is what it is. Brentford 0, Fulham 0. That was a snooze fest. Burnley 1, Newcastle 4. The Toon came south and just wiped the floor with Burnley, really. The credit to Burnley, they tried to play their football, but Callum Wilson on 19, Longstaff on 35, and Gamerish on 40 had it wrapped up before half-time. Isak scored on 55, and Darragh O'Shea pulled a late one back for Burnley, but it's a nail in the coffin for Burnley, really. Sheffield United 1, Nottingham Forest 3. The Blades went 1-up through Ben Brereton Diaz from the penalty spot. Hudson-Odoi equalised on 27 minutes. Ryan Yates put Forest ahead on 51. And Hudson-Odoi again on 65, giving Forest a win. Huge win for them. Ahmed Hodzic sent off on 96. Man City saw what Arsenal did and decided they were just going to show that they're a better team. Haaland on 12, Haaland on 35, Haaland on the brink of half-time, Haaland again on 54, just after Hwang had pulled one back to give Wolves some hope. And then Julian Alvarez wraps it up late. City never looked like it was even a struggle. They didn't even get out of second gear. It was all far, far, far too easy for Manchester City in that game. And it's an ominous sign for Arsenal that City are just looking terrifying at the moment. Chelsea 5, West Ham 0. Cole Palmer, Conor Gallagher, Noni Madeki, and then 2 from Nicholas Jackson in the second half. Comprehensive. West Ham did hit the crossbar 3 times, all of them Jared Bowen, but West Ham were awful. David Moyes, it's been announced since, will leave West Ham at the end of the season. It looks like it will be Julian Lopetegui who will take over, and we'll talk about that some more when we get through the rest of these games. Brighton 1, Aston Villa 0. Brighton were the better team, fully deserved the win. The penalty, was it a little bit soft? Yes, a little bit soft. João Pedro steps up, misses, but then heads home the rebound. Liverpool 4, Tottenham 2. Salah and Robertson in the first half, Gakpo and Elliott in the second half. Then Liverpool decided to switch off. Richarlison and Son put some respectability on the scoreline. But Liverpool played really well for 70 minutes. Really, really well for 70 minutes. The same cannot be said about Manchester United. Crystal Palace 4, Manchester United 0. Olise on 12. Just a comical goal. Eriksen falls over. Casemiro falls over. He carries the ball a good 15 yards and nobody makes a tackle, and he just passes it into the bottom corner. 40 minutes in, Mateta picks the ball up, dances past Johnny Evans and lashes it past the goalkeeper at the near post from a tight angle, from, a decent way out. Really poor goalkeeping. Tyreek Mitchell makes it 3. It's a Wharton ball in. Delow should deal with it. Anderson somehow manages to square it across the box, and Mitchell taps home. And then on 66 minutes, Olise made it 4 with a lovely curling shot after Casemiro had soiled himself. And we'll come back to Casemiro in a second. So the Premier League table. Arsenal top, 83 points. They have 2 games left. Manchester City sit in second place. They have 82 points. They've played 35 games. They've got 3 left, and they have a 6-goal disadvantage on Arsenal. Then it's Liverpool on 78 from 36 games, Villa on 67 from 36 games, Spurs on 60 from 35 games. So they do have the game in hand on Villa, but they're 7 points back, have a much worse goal difference, which means it's basically 8 points. And they've lost 4 in a row. They've lost 4 in a row. So if Villa take 1 point from the remaining 2 games, now bear in mind, Villa play Liverpool next and then Crystal Palace. So those are not easy games. Sorry, if Villa don't take any points, is what I was trying to say. If Villa don't take any points from the last 2 games, Tottenham still need to win their last 3. Now, they do play Burnley and they do play Sheffield United, but they also play Man City. So 4th is a wrap. It's going to be Aston Villa, and the top 4 will be Villa, Liverpool in 4th and 3rd, and then whichever way the top 2 work out. Tottenham, 5th is a certainty because they play Burnley and they play Sheffield United. And 5th is still progress for this team, considering where they finished last season, the fact that they lost Harry Kane in the summer. 5th is still progress. Newcastle now up to 6th, 56 points from 35 games. So the Toon have 3 games left. Now they play Brighton, that's tough. United away, who knows? And Brentford away. That's not easy. That's not easy at all. But they've got a 2-point gap on Chelsea, who've moved themselves up to 7th. Also 3 games left. Forest away, Brighton away, Bournemouth home. They could, in theory, win all 3 of them. But it's Chelsea, so they'll probably lose 2 of them. Manchester United now sit in 8th place. 54 points from 35 games. They've got Arsenal, they've got Newcastle, both at home, and then Brighton away. We're going to come back to them when we talk about Casemiro, because the whole thing needs to be discussed. West Ham United now in ninth on 49 points with 2 games left. Those games, obviously, Luton, that should be a win. And then Manchester City away, in which they will most likely get absolutely shellacked. Then it's Bournemouth, 48 from 36 games. They have Brentford home and Chelsea away. They should win one of those two. And winning one of those two should be enough to secure a top half finish. Although their goal difference doesn't favour them. And Brighton, 47 points, have a game in hand. But Brighton's run-in is Newcastle away, Chelsea home, United home. It's not easy for them. And Brighton do look very much like a team that just wants the season to end. Then we get Wolves. They sit in 12th place, 46 points from 36 games. They play Crystal Palace next, and then they're away to Liverpool. The way Palace are playing, you'd fancy Palace in that game, and you'd expect Liverpool to win at home, especially given it's Klopp's last game. Then we have Fulham, 44 points from 36 games. They play City next. You'd expect them to get beaten. They play Luton on the final day. They could well get beaten there. Then it's Crystal Palace, 43 points. Again, 2 games left. Palace, outside of Arsenal and City, the most informed team in the league. Actually, outside of City, the most informed team in the league. City have taken 15 points from the last 5 games. Palace have taken 13. Arsenal and Newcastle have taken 12. Crystal Palace, the second most informed team in the league over the last 5 games. Playing tremendous football. We'll come back to them because it is worth talking about Glasner. Then there's a 6-point gap to Everton. Everton right now obviously look safe. They won 3 games in a row. They've drawn their most recent game, 37 points. But there is the looming possibility of administration. Now, it may be in their interest to take the administration deduction this season because they should still stay up. They play Sheffield United next. They will get hammered by Arsenal on the final day. But if they can beat Sheffield United next, that gets them to 40. Take off 9. That's 31. I don't think Luton are getting to 31. Luton would need to win both games. And they play West Ham and Fulham. I just don't see them winning both games. So it might be within Everton's best interest, if they beat Sheffield United, to enter administration, take the 9 points now, and not go into next season with the threat of a 9-point deduction to begin things. Brentford, 36 points. Bournemouth away, Newcastle home. A damn squib of a season for them. Forest win was huge. Gives them a 3-point cushion on Luton and a significant goal difference. Gives them a 5-point lead on Burnley. So that final day against Burnley, in all likelihood, not going to mean a whole lot. But it might. If Luton win the next game and Forest lose to Chelsea, even Forest draw to Chelsea, all of a sudden that final day becomes important for Forest, but not for Burnley. We've done Luton. Burnley, they play Spurs, they play Forest. They're gone. They're not getting a result against Spurs, which will mean they cannot survive. And then Sheffield United are gone. So let's start with Sheffield United. 16 points for the season. They play Everton away next and then Tottenham at home. In all likelihood, they lose both games. That would mean that they finished the season on 16 points, which, not quite the worst ever. We do have the fantastic Derby County team to thank for that. But it would mean that they are the joint third worst team in Premier League history from a points tally. So they have more than that Derby team who took 11 points. They have one more point than Sunderland 05-06 who took 15 points. And they would be level with Huddersfield on 16 points. Huddersfield 18, 19. And we'll talk about Huddersfield more in part 2. Villa, they're 17 points in 15-16. And Sunderland took 19 in 02-03. So Sunderland will no longer have two of the worst 5 teams in Premier League history, which is reason for celebration for Sunderland, but that's the only reason for for celebration there at the moment. That Villa team was shocking. Huddersfield, look, they came up surprisingly. They stayed up even more surprisingly. It wasn't a shock when they went down, and look, 16 points is mortifying, but it is what it is. But this Sheffield United team, I mean, it's not just the 16 points, it's the 100 goals conceded. 100 goals conceded in 36 games. The only other Premier League team to concede 100 goals was Swindon Town. That was in a 42-game season. Sheffield United have beaten that, or matched that rather, in 36 games. And they still have Tottenham to play, and Tottenham are capable of scoring 4 or 5 against them. Everton are capable of getting 2 or 3 against them. Like, this is going to be a record that likely stands for a long, long time. A long, long time. Like, that Swindon season, you have to remember back. That Swindon season was 93-94. That's 30 years ago. 30 years ago. And they conceded 12 goals in their last 4 games, 6 in their last 2, to get to that 100-point tally. If we look at those Swindon results, they conceded 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. 6 times that season in 42 games. Like, that's really, really embarrassing. But Sheffield United, I mean, they've gone out of their way to be embarrassing this season. They've just been shellacked so many times. I mean, Toon beat them by 8. Arsenal beat them, there's 2. Burnley 3. Villa 4. Brighton 5. Arsenal 6. Newcastle 7. 7 times. And Tottenham could well make it 8. In, again, less games than Burnley. Or less games than Swindon. And Swindon, to their immense credit, did score 47 goals that season. Sheffield United have scored 26. I'm an idiot. They've scored 35. They've scored 35. It's the worst in the division, though. 35. Minus 65 goal difference. Swindon's was minus 53. Still dreadful, but not nearly as bad. I just feel like this Sheffield United team, they never gave themselves a chance at survival from the off. I'm just going to quickly go through the league table. So you've got the first season of the Premier League, the worst goal difference in the league is minus 21. Middlesbrough and Nottingham Forest, the bottom 2. The second season, it's minus 53, obviously. It is that Swindon team. You've got minus 57 and 94-95. That is Ipswich Town. Conceded 93 goals. 95-96, minus 32. 96-97, minus 28. 97-98, minus 45. Barnsley, who finished 19th. 98-99, the United won the treble. Nottingham Forest with minus 34. 99-2000, we've got Watford with minus 42. 2000-2001, Bradford City minus 40. 01-02, Leicester City minus 34. 02-03, we have Sunderland with minus 44. That's one of those top 5 worst seasons, obviously, prior to this one. Minus 39 for both Leeds and Wolves in the 03-04 season. Obviously, both of them relegated. 04-05, minus 35 for 19th place Norwich. 05-06, minus 43 for Sunderland again. Again, that's one of the worst teams in history. The second worst team in history in terms of points. 06-07, you've got Watford with minus 30, finishing bottom. 07-08 then, Derby County minus 69. Now, bear in mind, they only scored 20 goals all season, but they conceded 11 less than Sheffield United have conceded at this point. There's a real chance that Sheffield United pass that goal difference. That's the worst that we're going to get, minus 69. But Sheffield United minus 65 right now with 2 games left. 08-09, might as well just keep going. Minus 31. 09-10, minus 41. What's this? 10-11, minus 27. Like, these aren't even embarrassingly bad. These are just normally bad. Minus 42 for Wolves in 11-12. 12-13, minus 30. QPR and Reading. 13-14, minus 45 for Fulham. 14-15 then, minus 31 for QPR. 15-16, minus 49 for that Villa team. 16-17, we've got Hull, minus 43. They finished 18th. That's the highest anyone's finished thus far with the worst goal difference. Stoke, minus 33 in 15-16. Sorry, 17-18. It's the last time we've seen Stoke. 18-19, minus 54. That's that Huddersfield team. Minus 49 for Norwich in 19-20. 2021, we've got Sheffield United, minus 43. They conceded 63 goals that year, but they only scored 20. That was the last time they had this manager, who hates sandwiches. Minus 61 for Norwich in 21-22. Sheffield United are definitely going to beat that. And then 22-23, minus 37 for Southampton last year. So as things stand, they're going to be almost certainly one of the 5 worst, potentially joint 3rd worst in terms of points. They're going to be the worst defensive team of all time. And I think it's quite likely they end up with the worst goal difference of all time. Therefore, I do think there's a strong argument to be made that they sit right alongside that Derby team as the worst the Premier League has ever seen. I know Derby only took 11 points. I know they only scored 20 goals. But I mean, look at this mess. It's absolutely atrocious stuff. They're absolutely all over the place. There's no No real fight in them either. There's no pride. On the plus side, we do get 2 Sheffield derbies next year, so I'm excited for that. We'll move on to Crystal Palace, who I do think are worth highlighting here because they've just been excellent since Glasner took over and was able to implement his way of playing. Like, we're seeing them move the ball really, really well, really crisp passing, great movement. All the players seemingly in sync. And remember, you're looking at that team last night. Dean Henderson in goal. Is he the starter? I would say he's better than Sam Johnston for sure. So I would say yes. Nathaniel Klein is starting in a back three. Right, so there's problem number one. Joachim Anderson's really good. Chris Richardson is good. I think he'd be best suited as a squad player. But their best defender is Mark Guehi, and he's not there. And they're still playing this well. In midfield, you've got Muniz on the right, you've got Mitchell on the left, Adam Wharton and Will Hughes in the middle of the park. Now, Adam Wharton has taken to the Premier League like a duck to water. He has been so impressive. He is, of course, being misprofiled by silly people who are seeing him for the first time and think that he's a defensive midfielder because they look at counting stats and think that that's the mark of a defensive midfielder. Will Hughes is the current defensive midfielder in that team. He's the one doing the dog work. He's the one shielding the defence. He's the one allowing Wharton to play that bit higher. And when Czech Doucouré comes back, who is still their best midfielder, Czech Doucouré will do the same. And a Czech Doucouré, Adam Wharton midfield pairing is going to be really, really strong. You've got Elise and Eze behind Mateta. Elise is in incredibly good form after the injuries. Eze's playing really well, but Mateta might be the most informed striker in the league at the moment, which is bizarre because he couldn't hit a bull's arse with a banjo up until a few weeks ago. But you look at that team, right? You wouldn't have any issues going into next season with Henderson in goal, with Anderson as your middle centre-back. If they can keep Guehi Anderson +1 as a back three, a left footer, would be really strong. You bring Doucouré into that midfield, and all of a sudden that line of four becomes really, really good. Now, you could move Mitchell to the left side centre-back role and look to bring in maybe a more attack-minded left wing back, but I think more likely they target another centre-back. But all of a sudden, that's a really strong base. And then if you had Elise and Eze behind some weeks Mateta, some weeks a different type of striker, someone quicker with kind of more nimble movement, they would be a real threat to finish as not just scraping into the top half, but potentially an outside threat for the Europa Conference League spot. Because that would be a really strong team. Now, the issue would be depth and, if injuries and suspensions and tiredness and all that kick in. But that's a really, really good team. And that's 2 players away from what they currently have. 2 players. Now, the issue is, in all likelihood, they will lose 2 of Guehi, Eze, and Elise. I'm not sure which 2. If I had to bet, I would say Elise probably and Guehi maybe. But it depends on who's coming in for them. Like, Elise, he's had the injuries this season. Look, he had one injury that he then re-injured because Roy Hodgson refused to listen to the medical staff. And maybe that scares a few teams off. I think the buyout is 65 million, which is a significant amount of money. And it may make teams a little bit hesitant. He may also view his next move as, it should be a Champions League team. And it should be. It should be a Champions League team. I don't think he goes to Arsenal because they've got Bukayo Saka who plays in his position. I don't think he goes to City because they've got Phil Foden. Liverpool, I could definitely see having interest, especially under Arne Slot. Because the other position he could play at an incredibly high level is as a 10. and he'd be the perfect fit for Arne Slot's team as a 10. City, it looks like Lucas Paqueta is the player they want to bring in anyway, so I would rule them out. There have been links to United. I think if he's smart and well advised, which he appears to be, he will avoid that in the same way he turned down Chelsea last summer. So I could see him. I think it's likely he leaves, but I do think there is a world in which he stays. Guehi, I'm not really sure who would be in for him. He's really good, but if we again look at the top of the league, I mean, he's not going to go to Arsenal and sit on the bench. I don't think he'd want to go to City and sit on the bench. Maybe Arne Slot would like him at Liverpool because maybe he has eyes on different types of centre-backs, but I still think Michael Edwards will drive the, bigger, stronger type of centre-back, the guy 6'3" and above, aerially dominant. He'd be a really good fit at Villa. You could go Konza, Guehi, Pau Torres, but I don't think Villa will have that type of money to spend this summer. Again, he'd be a backup at Spurs. Newcastle is the one where I look at and think Guehi and Botman, really, really good fit. Really good fit. So Toon would be one to keep an eye on. I mean, Chelsea could use him. Guehi Caldwell as a 2 or as 2/3 of a 3 could be really good. United need all the help they can get, and maybe they'd be the club to come in from, but they're not being linked to him. They've been linked to Debo and others. I think West Ham is too much of a sideways move, and I don't think they'd have the money, and nobody below that has the kind of money. So I do just wonder, is there a world in which they go into next season and they still have all those players? It was great to see Guehi come back last night from the couple of months out with injury. And there's other good players there as well. Young players like Ahamada could be in the midfield rotation next year. Will Hughes. What's the fellow's name? Matthias Franke looks a really promising player. Edouard came off the bench last night. Schlupp's been reliable for them. Ayew does a job. If they could add 2, if they could keep this group at a left-footed centre-back, and it doesn't even have to be a starting striker, just a different type of striker. I'd move on Edouard and look for like a more of a poacher type. Maybe even someone like Datro Fofana on loan. Maybe that's a move they could look into. But I think we could get a really exciting Crystal Palace team. But massive credit has to go to Glasner. Like, he's just done a tremendous job since taking over. And it's an appointment that foolish people scoffed at. Foolish people asked if they knew what they were doing and, is he good enough to replace Roy Hodgson? Well, 11 games in, they've won 5, drawn 3, and only lost 3. And they've scored 21 goals and only conceded 13. They had a bit of a rough start, obviously. But that happens when a new manager takes over. They don't always get the immediate new manager bounce. But for them, they beat Burnley in the first game because he wasn't manager for the Everton game. He was appointed that day, but he was sat in the stands. They get a draw away to Everton. It's a decent result. They beat Burnley 3-0 at home. They should beat Burnley. They lose away to Palace. They lose away to Spurs. That's fine. Losing away to Tottenham's fine. Draw at home to Luton, bad result. Draw away to Forest, not a bad result. Loss away to Bournemouth, not a bad result. And loss home to Man City, not a bad result. The only bad result in that run is the Luton draw at home. But since then, beat Liverpool at Anfield, hammer West Ham, beat Newcastle quite comfortably, to be totally honest. Go away to Fulham and get a good point, and then absolutely decimate Manchester United last night. Absolutely destroyed them. Scored 4, hit the post, just tore United apart time and time again. And I think they're going to be a really good team next year. And it's really exciting when you look at the Premier League and you see, the managers in that bottom half. That really, really is strong. Like, there's just a lot of good managers now in the bottom half of the league. Like, De Zerbi is excellent. Gary O'Neill is very promising. Marco Silva is very good. Glasner's excellent. Dyche is very good. Thomas Frank, very good. I'm not a big fan of Nuno. He's okay, is what I would say. But I think Edwards has a big future at Luton. I think Company's got a big future. Chris Wilder's the only one that I look at and think, if you get sacked here, nobody else should fire you. Or should hire you. Like, there's jobs for Nuno abroad, I think, that would be fine because Nuno speaks 3 or 4 different languages. But in England, like, unless Chris Wilder's willing to go down to League One, I wouldn't touch him. You go above Brighton, let's say Bournemouth, Iraola, outstanding. Likely Lopetegui at West Ham next year. Very, very good. That's really strong compared to what it used to be like. And Glasner, I mean, he's going to add something to this league, which is important. Want to touch on finally then, was it United? It was United and Casemiro. My God. Now, Jamie Carragher went in on him after the game and told him he should basically learn Arabic. That's way too far. Way too far. You have to remember with Casemiro, he came from Real Madrid where he'd always played in a 3. And with Brazil, he'd always played in a 2 with another defensive midfielder. So you're never being asked to carry the entire defensive load of the midfield, ever, in those shapes. Even with the Modric, who's not a great defensive player, he's very intelligent and covers space really well. Toni Kroos is a very good switched-on defensive player. So Casemiro didn't have to do a ton of touchline to touchline running. He was able to sit in, shield that defense, and funnel runners into the right places to minimize danger. Same thing with Brazil. When he had Fred beside him as another ball winner, the two of them just split the pitch. So if you went down one side, Casemiro would deal with you. If you went down the other, Fred would deal with you. At Manchester United, he's having to do everything by himself. First and foremost, he's largely played in the midfield 2 there, right? Which obviously is not the shape he's played in for most of his career. So that's changed. To do it, international football is one thing. It's much slower paced. And he plays for Brazil, who are always going to be the better team in terms of quality and talent, et cetera, barring, maybe 5 games that they could play. And even that's a stretch, maybe 3 games. So he comes to United. They put him in a 2 with Christian Eriksen, who's not a good defensive player. He's a 10 who can't run much anymore. So you've got Casemiro last season having to do all of the defensive work. But remember, last season they were still throwing the likes of McTominay into that double pivot, who at least has legs. And Casemiro was able to manage his way through the season, lift United above the level they should have been at. They squeeze into the top 4 and they get a cup, right? Really, really good. This season he's played with Eriksen, who can't run, and Kobbie Mainoo. And I think Mainoo's very talented. By God, is he overrated, though? Like, defensively, on ball, he's quite good. On ball. See ball, go and get ball, very good. Positionally, atrocious. Reading the game, atrocious. Anticipation, dreadful. Spatial awareness, tracking runners, all of it. Really, really poor. Not Kobbie Mainoo's fault. He's a child. The fact that Manchester United are relying on him so much is an indictment of how bad United are and how bad that squad is. But it's left Casemiro having to do so much work this year that he has looked horrendous, without question. Last night and the game before, he played centre-back. He's not a centre-back. He got dribbled past 8 times last night. He was entirely at fault for the 4th goal. Dreadful on the 1st goal. Couldn't blame him on the other 2. But it's because he's having to defend massive spaces. Like, he's getting dribbled past because there's 10 yards either side of him for people to run around. If you put Casemiro in a 4-3-3 with the right players either side, players who are energetic, have good engines, decent recovery speed, but are also switched on defensively, he'd be absolutely fine. Would he be the Casemiro of Real Madrid? No, that player's gone. But he wouldn't look like a fella that belongs in Saudi Arabia or the MLS, as Jamie Carragher said it last night. He just wouldn't. And for Carragher, who a couple of weeks ago went after Ten Hag's tactical approach, to then completely ignore the fact that that tactical approach is the primary reason that Casemiro looks so bad. Casemiro is the biggest victim of how bad United are set up. And Carragher just ignores that so he can go on this little rant. And you know what? It's fine. He's entitled to go on his little rant there. But where was this energy last year when Jordan Henderson and James Milner were stinking the place up for Liverpool? Or the year before that, or the year before that? Where's this energy been for English players well past their best? Where was it for John Terry? Where was it for Rio Ferdinand? Where was it for his busy mate, Steven Gerrard, who in 14-15 looked like he would never, ever, ever be able to kick a football again, his legs were that far gone? Where was that energy for those players? Carragher's British bias is well known. Well known. Go and read his autobiography if you don't know of it. But for him, and credit to him, he did make the point that Casemiro has been an incredible player, much better than he ever was, and had a much better career than he ever had. But for him to have a go at Casemiro and then make excuses for Henderson like, oh, they need that leadership and experience. Well, hang on a second. Casemiro's a much better leader than Henderson. He's got far more experience of winning things. So where's that energy? It was fine for Jordan Henderson, but Casemiro, apparently, United, the first thing they need to do is get rid of him. It's just nonsensical. Put him in a 3 with legs either side him, and he'd be absolutely... Put him in the Arsenal team with Rice next to him, and he'd be absolutely fine. He'd be absolutely fine. So for United, what they really should be looking to do this summer is to go out and find themselves a dynamic ball winner and bring that dynamic ball winner in to play next to Casemiro. It doesn't have to be a top-class player. Yusuf Fofana of Monaco would work really well in that situation. Martin Frendrup of Genoa would be ideal. Ideal. Get him next to Casemiro. Let Casemiro just sit in and shield that defence while the other one goes touchline to touchline, breaking up play, winning the ball back, giving it to the lads that can play football, who can then get United moving in the right direction. Now, I'm currently running a campaign on my social media to, make sure everybody's aware that Erik ten Hag is a great manager and should absolutely be given a new contract and more money to spend. But you do really have to question some of the tactical approach. But you know what got me? Like, managers are all bullshitters. Every one of them, from Pep and Klopp all the way down to Chris Wilder. Every one of them just talks out of both sides of their mouth. But when Ten Hag came out and said, I'm not going to change my tactical approach, I had to take like a couple of seconds to make sure I'd heard what I thought I'd heard. Because his current Manchester United team in no way resemble his Ajax team, other than the fact that defensively, they're just not very good. That's because he's not a good coach. But they don't play anything like that Ajax team did. He changed his way of playing 45 minutes into his second game at Manchester United. That's what he did. And you know, it's funny. I've spent quite a bit of this podcast talking about how poor Sheffield United are defensively. But if you look at some of the numbers, Manchester United are every bit as bad, if not worse. Like, genuinely dreadful in so many different ways. And there's no excuse for it. Like, here's some good numbers for you, right? Casemiro obviously dribbled past 8 times. Fantastic. Manchester United have shipped 77 goals in 47 games in all competitions this season. They're most in a season since 77-78. Their current ratio of conceding 1.64 goals per game is their worst since 1962-63. Now, bear in mind that 77 in 48 is before last night. So that's now 81 games. Sorry, 81 goals in 48 games. So this is worse than that 77-78 season. In terms of shots faced in the Premier League, Manchester United are by far the worst. They're the only team in the league averaging over 20 shots conceded, 20 shots allowed, I suppose, per game. The only team. They're on about 21 point something. The next worst is 19. So they're allowing 2 shots per game more than the worst defensive team that the Premier League has ever seen. In terms of their XG against, they're right up there with West Ham. West Ham might be a shade worse, but they're about 2.1 a game. West Ham look to be maybe 2.15, 2.2, somewhere around there. Luton, better than Manchester United. Burnley, better than Manchester United. And amazingly, Sheffield United, conceders of 100 goals in 36 games, worse than Manchester United. Like, that is absolutely horrific. Horrific. They're one of the worst defensive teams I've ever seen. And they're not good going forward either. Unbelievable. We'll go to break. We'll come back. And we're going to dig into the Championship. See you after this. Right, welcome back. Now, before I get into the next part, I should have said in the first part, please do go to the Twitter account. I think it's No Context Goldbridge, and just watch his reaction to United's goal being correctly disallowed last night. It's one for the ages. It really is. It's one for even by Goldbridge standards. It's pretty special. Anyway, we will move on. And as you will have heard at the start of this podcast, today's episode is brought to you by Skybet. And therefore, it is time for us to take a wander into the Sky Bet Championship, which had quite the final day, it must be said. And I'll remind everybody that Sky Bet very much for the fans, championing the lower leagues, helping boost these clubs up, providing great resources and funding for many different projects to help communities. So, Sky Bet. But remember to gamble responsibly. We'll get to that a bit later. Where are we going? We're going to start with Stoke City 4, Bristol 0. Like I said, meaningless game. Swansea 0, Millwall 1. Millwall ending the season brilliantly. Fair play to them. Coventry 1, QPR 2. Coventry's season just sort of fell apart. Focus on the FA Cup, etc., etc. Middlesbrough 3, Watford 1. Rotherham 5, Cardiff 2. Rotherham had already been relegated, obviously, but at least going down with, a bit of a roar, so fair play. Those are the games that didn't really have anything riding on. Let's start at the top end. So we knew that Ipswich Town needed only a point to secure promotion. As it turned out, they wouldn't have needed anything because Leeds lost at home to Southampton. Adam Armstrong scored on 18 minutes. Joel Perreault equalised on 21. Will Smallbone scored on 35. But from there, Leeds never really looked like winning the game. And it felt to me a little bit like they knew what the result was or the scoreline was at Portman Road, and they just gave up. At Portman Road, Wes Burns put Ipswich 1-0 up on 27 minutes, and Omari Hutchinson doubled that lead on 48, and that was all she wrote. Ipswich win 2-0, and Ipswich secure automatic promotion into the Premier League. Automatic promotion from League One to the Championship, followed by automatic promotion from the Championship to the Premier League. In both seasons, scoring the most goals in their division and losing the least games. And bear in mind, they only lost 6 games this season. And I went through the kind of last 10 years, and that by any means is very, very impressive. 96 points for Kieran McKenna's team. Huge congratulations to them. Thrilled to have them back in the Premier League. It's going to be really tough for them. They're going to have to invest. I think it's right now, I would say unlikely that they survive, but you never know. This manager is really special. For Leeds, it is the playoffs. And in those playoffs, they will play Norwich City. Now, Norwich at the weekend went to Birmingham. Birmingham obviously needed the win to have a chance at survival. Norwich were safe in their playoff spot. And Birmingham won the game 1-0. Sorry, I got distracted there for a sec. Birmingham won the game 1-0 through a Paik Sung-ho goal on 55 minutes. Leaving Norwich finishing 6th, and they will take on Leeds, like I said, in the playoff semi-final. Leeds lost, like I said, to Southampton, so they finished 4th, and they will take on West Brom. Now, West Brom were the team potentially at risk of falling out of the playoff spots, but they got the job done with a 3-0 win over Preston. Alex Mowat, Kyle Bartley, and Darnell Furlong with the goals in that one. Really good win. Helps them jump Norwich and get, I think, the easier game. I think Southampton's a little bit easier than Leeds. I do. I think Southampton's a little bit easier than Leeds. So that's our playoff picture set. Leeds, Southampton, West Brom, and Norwich. Done and dusted. Ipswich up. And Leicester City up as well. Obviously, they were confirmed as champions before the weekend. Now, I said that game that they were playing this weekend had no meaning, and I was wrong. We'll come back to why. we'll move down the table. Actually, we won't. We'll just stop for a second. No, we are moving down the table, but we're going to start with Plymouth against Hull, which had potential playoff ramifications, had relegation ramifications as well. Plymouth win the game 1-0. A goal from Joe Edwards in the first half. Hull finish in 7th, 3 points outside the playoffs. And today, they have sacked their manager, Lemur Sr. Now, I think this is reprehensible. Before the season, I didn't see anybody pick Hull to finish even in the top half. I didn't see anyone suggest them as a playoff team. And I've seen some really strange takes, mostly from fans of Premier League clubs who probably just haven't paid attention to how the season has gone. Say, oh, but they had, Liam Delap on loan and Tyler Morton on loan, and they bought Jadon Philogene, and then they got Fabio Carvalho on loan, and they had Jacob Greaves. So it's a huge disappointment. Well, first and foremost, Jacob Greaves is the oldest of those players, and he's 23. The rest are kids. Secondly, there's 5 other players that need to be there to make up the team. And Hull do not have a particularly good goalkeeper. Outside of Greaves, the only decent defender they had in the first half of the year was Ruben Vinagre, who Sporting Lisbon recalled from loan in January and then sent him out to Hellas Verona. The midfield had talent with Tufan, Seri and Morton. That's good. The attack with Carvalho, with Philogene, good. Who was the striker that was going to get them up? Philogene was their top scorer. He got 12. Carvalho was second. He got 9. He joined in January. They were so desperate for a goal scorer that in January, they signed Billy Sharp. He's 38 years old. Like, I don't understand what was expected of Hull. Let's take a quick look at the teams that finished above them. Leicester City were in the Premier League last year. Leeds United were in the Premier League last year. Southampton were in the Premier League last year. West Brom were in the Premier League 3 years ago. Norwich were in the Premier League 2 years ago. 3 years ago, Hull were in League One. The only team that finished above them that would not have been expected to finish above them at the start of the season is Ipswich. Let's look below them. Middlesbrough, they were in the playoffs last year. Coventry, playoffs last year. Both of them would have been expected to finish above Hull this year, as would Watford, as would Sunderland. And most people probably had Blackburn too. Last season, Hull finished 15th. They were in the relegation scrap for much of the first part of the season. Like, last season, right? Top 3 obviously went up. Burnley, Sheffield United automatically, Luton through the playoffs. Middlesbrough, Coventry, Sunderland. They finished above all of them. Blackburn and Millwall missed out by the finest margins. Blackburn on goal difference, Millwall by a point and goal difference. They finished above both of them. West Brom finished above them. Okay, West Brom finished above them. They finished above Swansea, above Watford, above Preston, all of whom again finished above them last year. Norwich finished above them. They finished above Bristol City. So of the 14 teams that finished above them last year, minus the 3 teams that went up automatically and were replaced by 3 teams that came down, of the other 11 teams that finished above them last season, only 2 finished above them this season. West Brom and Norwich, clubs that have been in the Premier League quite recently. Now, I know that Hull have been in the Premier League in recent memory. It's 7 years since they were relegated. They've been relegated again since. They finished 15th last year. The season before that, having just been promoted, they finished 19th. I'm sorry. 19th, 15th, 8th, 7th, 7th. That's great progress. Great progress. And you've just been the manager. Like, again, just go and take a look at the Hull City squad. Of the players that they own, I would say there are 3 that could play in the Premier League. 3. Jacob Greaves, Jadon Philogene, and I would say Ozan Tufan. Now, they did in January bring in Abdul Kadir Umur, the Turkish international. Now, I think he's very, very talented. And I think if he can get back to his best, absolutely can play in the Premier League. So that's 4, right? That's the players that they own. But they don't own Liam Delap. They don't own Anas Zaroury. They don't own Fabio Carvalho. They don't own Tyler Morton. These are players in on loan. And they're kids. They're players that are not ready to play such a physical league week in, week out in a team that isn't, in a team where they're one of the better players. Like, Morton last year was at Blackburn. He was average the back half of the season. Average at best. Their fans were calling for him to get dropped. Carvalho played in the championship team at Fulham. A team made up of men with loads of Premier League experience, with Alexander Mitrovic having the best goal-scoring season that division's ever seen. He wasn't expected to carry the goal-scoring load the way he was this year. Like, look at the goalkeepers, right? Matt Ingram, Ryan Alsop, Ivan Pandor. Tell me the goalkeeper you were expecting to have a top-end season, right? Ingram played 12 games. His career to date, 6 years at Wycombe with loans at Lewis, Hayes and Yeading, and Oxford City, all non-league teams. Then QPR with loans at Northampton and back to Wycombe. He did not work out at QPR. He's been at Hull since 2019. He's played 100 games, 111 games, 100 games in the league. Like, he's not a top-end goalkeeper. Ryan Alsop was brought to be the backup. He's a career journeyman. A career journeyman. Who is the goalkeeper here that you were expecting to have this, great season? Look at the defenders. Louis Coyle, he's a solid right back. Solid. But he's a career lower league player. They got him from Fleetwood. Ruben Vinagre is good, but he left in January. Ryan Giles is okay. He's in on loan. Another one in on loan. Because Luton didn't feel he was good enough to play in the Premier League. They bought him in the summer and sold him because they didn't feel he was good enough to play in the Premier League. Greaves is excellent. Alfie Jones, I mean, He's a lower league player. Before he went to Hull, and bearing in mind, he joined Hull when they were in League One, he'd played for St Mirren and Gillingham, Scottish Premiership and League One. That was the level he was at. Sean McLaughlin, a good, hard-working player, honest pro, but he's never kicked a Premier League ball in his life. He was playing in the League of Ireland before they bought him. He's only really become an important player for them in the last couple of years. Brandon Fleming barely played, James Furlong barely played, Andy Smith barely played. Matty Jacob playing regularly. The kid was on loan at Pickering Town a couple of years ago in Gateshead. He's a decent player, but he's not a Premier League caliber player. He's not someone that's going to elevate you above. Cyrus Christie? He's had a solid career in the lower leagues. No one has ever said, what Premier League team X who need a right back should do is sign Cyrus Christie. Nobody's ever said that. There's not one defender there outside of Greaves the Premier League teams are going to be looking at this summer. The midfield is talented. It is very talented. But remember, Tufan only started 24 games. He missed 10 completely through injury. Adama Traore, not the muscly one, looks a decent player from what I've seen. But, he's a 28-year-old who was more than happy to join a championship team coming from Turkey. Doesn't say that he's of the highest quality. Harry Vaughan barely played. Morton played a ton. Again, he's a championship caliber player. So you can't expect him to fully elevate your team. Seri's a decent player who's past his best. Regan Slater, another talented player, but not someone anyone's ever said a Premier League team should be jumping to sign. At 24 with, plenty of experience under his belt, 194 senior games, he's never been linked to the Premier League team. Scott Twine, he's owned by Burnley, right? Burnley bought him last season in the Championship, and he played 14 games for them. He'd come through at Swindon, he'd gone to MK Dons. He was unbelievable for MK Dons. Got 20 goals in 45 games. Stepped up into the Championship with Burnley and struggled at that level. This season, he was loaned to Bristol City, wasn't doing particularly well, got pulled back and sent off to Hull. He's a good player. He's not someone who's too good for the Championship. Carvalho, again, he's not proven outside the Championship. And Umar has just been in a rut for a couple of years. If he gets out of it, he'll be really good. Again, you look at the attackers. Where are the goals coming from? Philligan's a winger. Delap is a promising player. But, who else is going to score for you? And I saw someone say with the money they've spent, what money? Money was spent on who? In the summer, they signed Xavier Simmons from Chelsea. He's currently on loan at Fleetwood. They signed Owen Foster from Scunthorpe. He went on loan to Chorley Town this year. Joseph Johnston, Nathan Tinsdale, AJ Weston, Rajdeep Palit, Henry Sandett, Tyler Sellers-Fleming. All of these players were signed for the academy, by the way. They signed Jason Lokillo from Sparta Rotterdam. If I'm not mistaken, he's already been binned off on loan. Yeah, binned off on loan in January. 18 appearances, 0 goals. Signed, by the way, on a free. Aaron Connolly signed from Brighton, I believe on a free, undisclosed fee. I'd imagine it was about $500,000 at most. I'd imagine it was very, very cheap. And I like Aaron Connolly, but goal scoring is not his thing. James Furlong, left back, signed from Brighton. Didn't kick a ball all season by the looks of it. Another young fella. And Jaden Philogene. Like, that's the one signing they made where they actually spent a real sum of money. And he was excellent. Absolutely excellent. But there's a reason Villa were willing to let him go. Villa didn't think he was going to make the grade there. Now, he's had a tremendous season. He's very, very talented. But that's there somewhere. They also signed Ryan Alsop, like I said, from Cardiff. That was an undisclosed fee. I'd imagine it was a small fee. In 2021, he had to go on trial to earn a contract at Derby. And he played in a team that got relegated. So, what exactly am I supposed to be impressed by these owners? Like, they spent money. On who? Who did they spend money on? I think I got the loans the wrong way around. I think Scott Twine went to Hull first and then went to Bristol. Either way wasn't good on either. They brought in Delap on loan. They won't have paid a fee there. They brought in Borja Edenlik on loan from Fenerbahce, an 18-year-old. So what was he going to do? Didn't play by the looks of it. Morton. And then in January, they went and they got Carvalho, Giles, Noah Ohio, who I watched dribble himself almost dizzy in one game. And look, it was okay, but like who am I supposed to say, well, they spent a bunch of money on him and it didn't work out and that's the manager's fault? Like, look at the squad. Look what they did in the summer. Look at the lack of spending. What are we meant to be impressed by? It's absolute nonsense. I think it's a terrible decision to sack him. Genuinely, I think it's a terrible decision to sack him. He finished 7th. Got 70 points. Last year, you got 58. The year before, you got 51. And the year before that, you were in League One. So, settle yourselves down, Hull. Anyway, the other team in that game were Plymouth. They needed to win to stay up, and they did win. And because they won, and because Sheffield Wednesday also won, they went to Sunderland, and Liam Palmer scored, and Josh Windus scored. 38 minutes in, that was it. Game over. Good night. The Owls are safe, Plymouth are safe, and Birmingham are gone. Birmingham, they did win 2 of their last 4 with 2 draws in between. And, they almost managed to pull it off. But the bottom line is they've gone down because of their own stupidity. Because they were 6th when they sacked their manager to hire Wayne Rooney, who's a bad manager, had proven he's a bad manager with DC United. And within 2 months, they were sacking Rooney. And it's unfortunate what's happened with Tony Mowbray. And I don't know what's going to happen moving forward with them. But they're now relegated, and deservedly so. Deservedly so. Now, it could have been quite different. Blackburn Rovers, and I said this game didn't mean anything, and I was corrected, and I can't remember who pointed this out to me, so apologies. You know who you are. You sent it to me on Twitter. Because Sheffield Wednesday, Plymouth, and Birmingham all won, and because of the scorelines that they won by, had Blackburn Rovers, let's just say, lost 1-0 to Leicester City, Blackburn would have gone down. A draw was enough to keep them up, but had they lost, they would have actually finished below Birmingham. But Sammy Smodic scored on 68 and again on 94. Very clear that the Leicester players have been on the piss for, a week and had no interest in playing the game. But Blackburn went there and got the job done. So to recap, Stoke 4, Bristol 0, Sunderland 0, Sheffield Wednesday 2, Swansea 0, Millwall 1, Coventry 1, QPR 2, Ipswich 2, Huddersfield 0, Leicester 0, Blackburn 2, Plymouth 1, Hull 0, Birmingham 1, Norwich 0, West Brom 3, Preston 0, Middlesbrough 3, Watford 1, Leeds 1, Southampton 2, and Rotherham 5, Cardiff 2. Coming up, Leicester and Ipswich. Playoff semi-finals, Leeds versus Norwich, Southampton versus West Brom. And going down into League One, Birmingham, Huddersfield, and Rotherham. Now, as I mentioned, League One, should remember that coming up, we have Portsmouth and Derby County. And the playoffs are Bolton versus Barnsley and Peterborough versus Oxford. The first legs took place on Friday and Saturday. Bolton went to Barnsley and beat them 3-1. Dion Charles scored twice. Sam Cosgrove pulled one back for Barnsley, and then a Randall Williams corner in the 94th minute went directly in. So big win for Bolton, puts them in the driving seat massively in that tie. On Saturday, Oxford United 1, Peterborough 0. Elliot Moore with the only goal. The second legs, Bolton-Barnsley is tonight at 8 p.m. And Peterborough-Oxford is tomorrow night, also 8 p.m. Going down from that division, Cheltenham, Fleetwood, Port Vale and Carlisle. They'll obviously drop into League Two. And in League Two, we have coming up Stockport, Wrexham and Mansfield. The playoffs are MK Dons against Crawley and Doncaster against Crewe. We had the first leg of the Doncaster-Crewe game yesterday. In Crewe, Doncaster walked in and won 2-0. Goals there from Molyneux and Biggins. Tonight at 7:30, we have Crawley versus MK Dons in their first leg. Going down, we have Forest Green and Sutton United. They will drop in to the National League. And coming up from the National League, obviously, we knew that Chesterfield ran away with the division. Yesterday, we had the National League playoff final, Bromley against Solihull Moors. Bromley went 1-0 up through Michael Cheek. Joe Sparrow equalised. Cheek from the penalty spot made it 2-1. Jamie Osborne equalised. Couldn't find a winner in extra time. The game went to penalties. And Bromley triumphed 4-3 on penalties to secure their spot in the League Two. In League Two for next season. Massive congratulations to everybody at Bromley. They fully deserve it. If you look at the season that they had, they finished third. And once Barnet went out, they looked like the favourites to come up. So credit to them. Looking forward to seeing how they do next year. That is that. We'll be back after this break. Right, welcome back. I should have mentioned that the Championship playoffs, the first leg is next Sunday, 12 p.m. kickoff, Norwich against Leeds at Carrow Road. 2:15 kickoff at the Hawthorns, it is West Brom, Southampton. And then the second legs are the Thursday and Friday of the following week. Both will be 8 p.m. kickoffs. Like I mentioned, we do have League One and League Two playoff games tonight. We also have an enormous Champions League semi-final second leg tonight. It is PSG at home to Borussia Dortmund. Dortmund 1-0 up from the first leg, you'll remember. So that one should be a belter. Then tomorrow night, I think, is the bigger one at Real Madrid against Bayern Munich. So lots of fun to be had, lots of games to watch, and it's all very exciting, isn't it? We're right at the business end of the season. And there's still quite a bit to be decided in English football, and then obviously in the Champions League, Europa League, and Europa Conference League. Less so in the other top European leagues, but we'll go around Europe tomorrow and see what's what, because we have no Premier League midweek games this week. Let's see now. No games this week. We have obviously next Saturday. Next Saturday we have 8 games. One on the Sunday. I assume that's because of the championship games. And one on the Monday. Then we do have midweek games the following week, which are the 3 makeup games that need to take place. Tottenham City on a Tuesday, Brighton Chelsea, and United Newcastle on the Wednesday. And of course, if City win that game against Tottenham, if they assuming they beat Fulham on Saturday in the early kickoff, if they then beat Tottenham, regardless of what's happened with Arsenal and United, City will be top going into the final day. But if United were somehow, and it's unlikely, but somehow to get a result against Arsenal in that game, City could win the league in that game against Spurs. So we might not get to the final day at all. Now, let's have a look at the news. David Moyes out at West Ham United. I think it's the right move. I think it's the right move for everybody, including David Moyes. I think it's the right timing for him to move on. He's done a very, very good job. He's had 2, potentially 3, see how this season finishes out, top half finishes. For a team that had 9 before he got there, we're far more used to finishing in the bottom half. He's had 3 really good European runs. He's won a trophy. Now, some people will scoff at that trophy. I will not be among them. I think in 25 years, that trophy will have a lot more credence than it does now, and people will view that as more of an achievement. Now, it won't be a help to Moyes then, because he'll be, well, long retired. But I think it matters. I do think it matters. It's the first silverware West Ham had won in a long time. In a long, long time. Not counting, like, the championship. He has rehabilitated his reputation. Obviously did a great job at Preston, at Everton. United was a disaster. Sunderland was a disaster. Real Sociedad was a disaster. He got the West Ham job the first time around because they were desperate. And he did well. And then they booted him. And nobody else would take a chance on him. He got no offers. So he sat at home for, a year and a half? And then he came back and he's done really well. He will get offers. Starting tomorrow, I'd imagine his agent will start to hear from clubs. I think David Moyes will be employed somewhere next year. For West Ham, there's always going to be a ceiling on what David Moyes can do with your club, and there's a limit to what his football can bring out of certain players, like Lucas Paqueta, like Mohamed Kudus, like Edson Alvarez, even like Jared Bowen. Even though I say even like Jared Bowen, Bowen has obviously done very well there. I think he can do better under a different manager. Now, is Lopetegui that manager? That I'm not sure of. His football isn't a million times more entertaining than Moyes, but he is a manager, I think, with a slightly higher ceiling than Moyes. I'd put him in the same kind of bracket as Unai Emery. He's not quite as good, but he's up there. He's another exciting addition to the Premier League. I know we've already seen him at Wolves. I thought he did quite a decent job at Wolves, all things considered, and I expect him to do well at West Ham. So I'm in favour of this move for all parties. I think it's a nice clean break. I think they should have probably parted ways at the end of last season, just on the high of having won the trophy. But again, they've improved in the league this year, so there is that, and they had a good European run getting to the quarterfinals of the Europa League. And losing to the team I think everybody expects to win. So, yeah, all in all, I think that's the right move. Unlike Hull, who I think have made a very, very silly move. Everton fans have called for an end to takeover farce. More really, really unflattering reports around 777 Partners and their finances and how it may very well be a castle built on sand. And that's why I was mentioning Everton and the possibility of administration before the end of the season. Nottingham Forest have been unsuccessful in their appeal against their 4-point punishment for breaching the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. The case was held on the 24th of April, and the appeal board has upheld the original decision of the independent commission. They're still going to stay up in all likelihood. 3 points clear of Luton. We've been over this. I think they should be. They should be fine. Thiago Silva will join Fluminense following Chelsea's final Premier League game of the season on the 19th of May. And he will, I think, not be able to play for them until the 1st of July, but he's able to go and, train and acclimatise and whatever else. I'd imagine he'll want a break as well, because he couldn't come off the back of playing a full Premier League season and then go into the Brazilian season, which obviously runs at a different time to the Premier League. Like, just for example, they've just had match week 5 of the Brazilian Serie A season. So for the best for him to have that time to recuperate. What other news do we have here? Underperforming Man United, one of the worst coached teams in the league. There's a good piece actually on Enzo Maresca and the impact he's had at Leicester. Well worth your while giving that a read. There's also a piece about David Moyes and what his legacy will be. Let's have a look. Who was rejected for being too small? It's Garth Crooks' Team of the Week. There's a picture of Harvey Elliott, so I'm going to assume that it's Harvey Elliott. Let's have a look. So he's gone David Raya in goal. Right, let's just hang on a second. He's gone David Raya in goal. Arsenal played Bournemouth. He can see he faced 2 shots. He faced 2 shots, and he was put in the Team of the Week. And he flapped at one that should have been a goal. That's laughable. At the back, Thiago Silva. Really? Like, Chelsea did not look good defensively in this game. West Ham hit the bar 3 times. But Silva won a header that led to a goal, and apparently that's what he's in for. Willy Bolly, he played okay, but it was Sheffield United. Joachim Anderson, fair enough. Fair enough. In midfield, Declan Rice had a very good game, absolutely. Harvey Elliott had a very good game, absolutely. Martin Odegaard had a good game, not a very good game. I wouldn't have had him in. And Cole Palmer, who had one of his quieter games, but he did score. So, Nicholas Jackson got 2, was awful in the first half, but he's in. Erling Haaland got 4, he has to be in. Hudson-Odoi, I'm glad to see. He's done honourable mentions this week. Morgan Gibbs-White, who played significantly better than Nicholas Jackson, than Cole Palmer and Martin Odegaard, he doesn't get in. Noni Mudeki, he was quiet enough, he did score. Michael Elisa was brilliant last night, and somehow he doesn't get in. Absolutely hilarious. So who was rejected for being too small? Oh, Harvey Elliott. Oh, he was turned away at Chelsea because he was too small. Yeah, I mean, in fairness, that might have been the reason they gave. The other reason was probably they didn't feel he was good enough at the time, because Chelsea's academy, there's so many kids go on trial there because of how they have it set up with the different satellites, that they end up missing out on quite a few players that they deem not good enough because they see them at like 7 and 8. And there's just that many kids that they're going to get a bunch of them wrong. Most of them wrong, probably. But yeah, I mean, the team's a nonsense as always with Gareth, but that is what it is. Let's see. Right, we'll just do the gossip then, will we? Let's get into it. We've got 3 days worth to get into. This is a rather long podcast, I'm aware. But I did a couple of short ones last week. Didn't do one yesterday, and I'm just feeling very chatty today. It's also one of the better days I've had. Actually, we've got 4 days of gossip. One of the better days I've had with this whole room spinning thing. So I'm hopeful that it's starting to move past, shall we say. Right, so we've got Tuesday, Monday, Sunday, so I need Saturdays. Will you scroll down? Saturday's gossip column. Here we go. Lots of nonsense, but it's fun. Bayern Munich manager Thomas Tuchel is among Manchester United's list of potential replacements for Erik ten Hag. Tuchel has opened the door to staying at Bayern Munich despite it being announced in February that he would leave, largely because there's no one else that wants it by the looks of it. Mikel Arteta has made Alexander Isak his top target this summer. I wouldn't believe the source on that. RB Leipzig's Benjamin Sesko is a cheaper alternative. That I could see. Arsenal have opened contract talks with Gabriel in a bid to fight off interest from Europe's top clubs. None of Europe's top clubs are asking about him. Inter Milan Vice President Javier Zanetti has suggested that the Serie A champions might challenge Arsenal and Manchester United for the signature of Joshua Zirkzee. It could be interesting. Manchester United have made contract with Adrian Rabiot. Okay. Aston Villa do not intend to turn Nicolo Zaniolo's loan move into a permanent switch, but the Midlands club have asked Juventus about Matthias Sule. If Juventus let Sule go, they are even more moronic than I thought. It's a shame it didn't work out for Zaniolo. He had some really good performances, but just couldn't do it consistently there. Tosin Adarabioyo is leaning towards joining Newcastle when his contract is up. Everton hope to persuade Jarrett Brantwaite to stay at Goodison for one more year, but Manchester United are confident of a 60 to 70 million pound bid being accepted. 60, 70 million off one season is absolutely wild. Genuinely wild. Tottenham will listen to offers for Richarlison this summer. Yeah, that makes sense. Real Madrid have made inquiries about 16-year-old Argentine midfielder Franco Mastantuono. Yeah. That's what Real do. They just target the best young players and get them. Barcelona have made Thomas Partey their top summer transfer target. I would bet any amount of money you want to put up that they have not. And I don't know who Darren Looney is, but he's definitely a spoofer. Definitely a spoofer. Manchester United are considering a move for Christos Mandas. Manchester City are considering a move for Christos Mandas, the Lazio goalkeeper. He's 22 years of age. Dougie Friedman is one of the last 3 candidates as Newcastle look to recruit a replacement for Dan Ashworth. Ruben Amorim is not ruling out talks with Chelsea. Well, he kind of did, so that's not true. Inter Miami are in talks with Angel Di Maria. AC Milan manager Stefano Pioli, who's expected to leave Milan this summer, is the leading candidate to take over at Napoli. That would be a horrendous appointment by Napoli. Erik ten Hag is a potential candidate to replace Thomas Tuchel at Bayern Munich. I mean, what are Bayern doing? Bayern have spoken to the management team of Julian Lopetegui, but it looks like he's given his word to West Ham. The Premier League bag of money and job security, probably more appealing at this point for him. Chelsea have made contact with Napoli about Victor Osimhen, and we've been hearing about this for 2 years. It's probably just nonsense. It's Di Marzio. It's always nonsense with him. Barcelona are targeting Darwin Núñez as a replacement for Robert Lewandowski. Okay. Manchester United are awaiting offers for Anthony. I think they'll be awaiting offers for a long time. Arsenal have a verbal agreement with Brentford to complete the permanent signing of David Raya. They don't have a verbal agreement. They have a contractual agreement to complete the signing of David Raya for 27 million. You absolute moron, Romano. Liverpool are hopeful Pep and Linders will return to Anfield in the future. They're definitely not. They're definitely not. There's parties being thrown that he's leaving. Manchester United intend to use Harry Maguire as bait to tempt Everton into selling Jared Bradley. Imagine a centre-back pairing of Maguire and Tarkowski. And I like Tarkowski, but imagine how slow that would be. Palmeiras boss Abel Ferreira wants club president Lilu Pereira to block the sale of Estevão Willian to Chelsea. This claims Chelsea have tabled a £47 million bid. I wouldn't imagine that's true. Let's see. Yeah, that's just nonsense. But I wouldn't be surprised if Abel Ferreira wants them to block the sale of Estevão, because if they keep him for a couple of years, that fee might double. He is genuinely special. He also needs to bulk up, though. Former Chelsea boss Graham Potter is in the running to be the Ajax manager. He already turned it down. Potter is on Feyenoord's shortlist. Again, he's not going to go to the Eredivisie. Certainly not to Feyenoord. Maybe he would. Feyenoord would be maybe more interesting than Ajax. Getafe have opened talks at Manchester United over the possibility of another loan from Mason Greenwood. Here's hoping Getafe get relegated next season. Dusan Vlahovic is attracting interest from Arsenal as Mikel Arteta looks to bolster his striking options. Jarrell Quansah is in line for a new contract at Liverpool. That's an obvious one. And more about Joshua Zirkzee into Milan. Moving on. Arsenal are ready to listen to offers for Gabriel Jesus. Thomas Partey and Jesus are said to be on the radar of several clubs in Saudi Arabia. This is what clubs put out, I think. Now, Partey, I could see Saudi Arabian clubs wanting him and him being up for that move, given his age and whatever else. The fact that he left this vastly superior Atletico Madrid team to join Arsenal, who were much worse than them, purely for money, does hint that might be his motivation. But, I mean, he's a terrible set of lads and nobody should sign him. I just don't see Jesus, who's only 27, having any interest in going to Saudi Arabia at this point. But maybe he will. Thomas Tuchel is a leading contender to join Manchester United. Could we get a swap then? Could it be Tuchel to United and Ten Hag to Bayern? I mean, United win that swap because Ten Hag is dreadful. Callum Wilson's future remains uncertain. At Newcastle, with him being linked to a move away. Borussia Dortmund want to keep Jadon Sancho, but a permanent move is currently unlikely and not affordable. Manchester United are hoping to raise 100 million by selling Sancho and Mason. If they raise 70 million from those two, I'd be stunned. If they raise 100 million from those two and Anthony, I'd be a little bit surprised, being totally honest. United have held talks with Sancho during his loan spell. Look, if Ten Hag goes, bring him back, stick him in the number 10 position, sell Bruno Fernandes because his age doesn't line up when you might be good. Turn the team over to Sancho and let's see what happens from there. Serhou Guirassy has emerged as a target for Arsenal. That one wouldn't surprise me because I don't think they've got the money that they're pretending they have this summer. I think if they could sell players, they would have some money, but I don't think they have as things stand. Calvin Phillips' hopes of rejoining Leeds depend on the Elland Road side earning promotion. Well, that's obvious. Captain Obvious, really. Aston Villa are close to signing Mario Hermoso. He's dreadful, so why? AC Milan are considering Jonathan David. That'd be a good signing for them. He'd be a really good get for them. Let's see then. Jadon Sancho does not want to return to Manchester United. He doesn't want to go back if the same fella is manager. I think he'd go back otherwise. Darwin Núñez deleted all the images of his time at Liverpool off his Instagram. Nobody cares. Inter Milan are willing to listen to offers for Denzel Dumfries. They've been willing to listen to offers for him for years. Years. Chelsea have stepped up their interest in Shakhtar Donetsk, 65 million rated Georgi Sudikov. You think they would have learned the lesson from Mudryk. He's a really good player, really talented. That league is garbage. You don't pay 65 million for players from that league. Roma want to sign Romelu Lukaku on a permanent deal this summer, and Chelsea are willing to sell for 38 million. I doubt Roma want to pay more than 20. Jan Oblak is another player on Chelsea's radar. Unbelievable. Newcastle are set to rekindle their interest in Michael Olise. With FFP, they don't have the flexibility to do that deal. West Ham and Tottenham are the front runners to sign Ivan Toney. There it is, football transfers. Is it Steve K? Spoofing as always? It is Steve K. Spoofing as always. Victor Gyökeres has refused to commit his future to Sporting Lisbon. That's not what he said either. That is nonsense. Arne Slot, who is expected to replace Jurgen Klopp, could return to Feyenoord for Mats Wiefer and Lucarel Gertruda. No, he couldn't, because he'll have no say in the transfers. Sevilla are among a number of clubs monitoring Enzo Moravska. Well, there's no chance they're going to leave after getting them promoted. Manchester United are trying to find a buyer for Casemiro this summer. If he does leave, because they'll ask for a big amount of money, because they'll ask for 25 million or so, and he's on 350 grand a week. So realistically, it is Saudi for him unless United are willing to let him go for free by paying up his contract. I don't know. Who cares? They're dreadful. Right, folks, that's it from me for today. I will be back, obviously, tomorrow with a shorter pod. I do promise it'll be a shorter pod tomorrow. But that's a wrap for today's show. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I did recording. And before we part ways, let's take a moment to acknowledge the support of Sky Bet, the true champion of the fans. For over a decade, Sky Bet has not only sponsored the EFL, but also shown a deep commitment to enhancing the fan experience through betting and beyond. It's clear the Sky Bet stands for the fans, ensuring our love of the game is always celebrated. And as we close, remember, if you're engaging with betting, it's important to do so responsibly. Sky Bet reminds you that this is for those aged 18 and over. So please visit begambleaware.org to get more information on responsible gambling. That is begambling.org. With Sky Bet, it's all about the fans. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Sports Social Podcast Network.